Okay, welcome everybody to our weekly connection. It's good to see you all. How's everybody? Amazing? Awesome? Okay. So, וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ויקחו לי תרומה מאת כל איש אשר ידבנו ליבו וגומר. רבי יחיא פתח כי יעקב בחר לו יהיה ישראל, לסגולתו כמה חביבין ישראל כמה קודשה בייחוד יתראה בהו, ובא להידבקה בהו להתקשרה עם ההון. ועבד להון אמר, יחידאי בעלמא דכתיב ומי כעמך כישראל גומר אחד בארץ. ואינו נתראו בה והתקשרן בה, הידכתיב כי יעקב בחר לו יהיה, וכתיב כי חלק י"ק עמו ויהב לשאר המין שולטנין, רב רבן ממנן עליהון, והוא נתין לחולקי ישראל. So Rabbi Chia, the student of Rabbi Shimon, is opening the discussion, Ki Yaakov Bachar Lo Ya, because Jacob is the one who chose for himself Yud-K, Israel is Gulato. Yud-K Israel is Gulato, so he chose basically a spiritual path for the accomplishment of his spiritual accomplishment. רבי חייא פתח כי יעקב בחר לו יה ישראל לסגולתו. So everything that we discussed as to what is the code, what is behind the code Israel is the spiritual work as designated or as taught by our forefather Jacob. And so Jacob represents more than such an individual. He represents the chariot of Tiferet, and furthermore, he represents what we recognize as spiritual work. Spiritual work is Yud-K Israel. So, Yaakov Bachar Lo Yud-K Israel is Gulato, which would be, that choice would bring him satisfaction, fulfillment, accomplishment. Kama ahuvim hem bnei Israel lifnei הקודשה בריחו. Kama ahuvim, how much are the children of Israel being loved by the Creator? And so here we understand from that sentence what it means, the children of Israel. Because when we speak today about the children of Israel, we can go to church, to temple, to whatnot. We would hear, like from the New Testament, the Old Testament, the children of Israel. We would have, a connection to the land of Israel, right? Although here, the Zohar says, Ki Yaakov Bachar Lo Yud-K Israel. So we know that Jacob is the one that was named Israel, and it is his ways that connected him to the Creator, and whoever follows his ways connects to the Creator. How much are the children of Israel, in other words, how loved are the descendants of Israel? It's very easy to discern or to indicate who are today the children of Israel. Think about it. What does Israel represent? Israel represents the central column that is going against our nature, going against our negative nature. We're not going out against our positive nature to do evil. we are going against our nature to remove those layers that we call the klipa, so that what is left is the purity of our soul. In order to accomplish that purity, so that we can be in the likeness of the Creator, and therefore like attract like, shivui tzura, the similarity of form, would take shape. The only way that we can grant that to take shape, that similarity of form of the soul in the likeness of the light, is that we need to remove all those layers of negativity. What are those layers of negativity? Layers of negativity is not to determine that somebody is good or bad. It's a layer of negativity is sadness, sorrow, judgment, blame, victimness, jumping to conclusion, lack of empathy, lack of mercy, lack of patience, lack of whatever. Well, you can end the sentence however you like. So those are the children of Israel. The children of Israel are the ones that basically are working on those negative traits that each and every single one of us, each and every single human being possesses. So you could say, oh, okay, so this person is of the descendants of the children of Israel, of Jacob, and this one is not. The truth of the matter is that you could start as being a very selfish individual, and then along your existence, things happen, bad things happen, that accelerate the process of awakening of an individual, and that individual suddenly wakes up to the spiritual work. And the spiritual work is to realize that there are things that are bigger than us, that we have greater purpose than paying the bills, paying taxes, which are important, but are very earthly. Those are not like things that are going to change the world and reveal tremendous light to get rid of chaos and bring, human dignity and whatnot. So, which means that we might not be born under the cloud or the umbrella of, let's say, the descendants of Israel, but anybody can join, can follow that path. This is why, like, the reason that we're studying this, anybody can open the Zohar and read this, and you can just read it and completely disregard it and continue on your life. And some people might actually open this one paragraph and discuss it for the next 45 minutes and realize, wait a second, this is what I've been doing for the last 2 years, 10 years, whatnot, that you've been working on yourself, you've been studying Kabbalah, learning about the opponent, learning about restriction, learning about the central column. This is what we're discussing, to go against our nature so that we can eradicate, remove those negative layers, so that what is pure in us is going to come to the surface and be in affinity with the light. And as we become more in affinity with the light, we experience less chaos. It's not that we experience less challenges, because as we become more spiritual, challenges are recognized as the means to the end. So we actually, a righteous person actually looks for challenges because they are immediately recognized as opportunities to reveal light. When bad things happen to us, we just say, oh my gosh, another thing and another. We get overwhelmed. Why do we get overwhelmed? Because in that time frame, at least where I am right now in my level of consciousness in my life, I'm not so much in tune with that spiritual path. So it's very possible that you're doing all the right things spiritually, but are you on the spiritual path? Not necessarily. So you could be like doing the spiritual things and sharing and caring and praying and connecting and doing charity, etc. But it doesn't guarantee, it doesn't grant somebody to be on the spiritual path. To be on the spiritual path is on every single moment conscious decision. What am I countering? What is it? What layer of negativity am I working on right now? And so if we go back into the robotic, we spoke about it a little bit last week, we go back into the habit and the robotic, then we sort of, break away from that spiritual path. We might still do spiritual things, but not necessarily on the spiritual path. Kama ahuvim em bnei Israel, so how loved are they, the descendants of Jacob, שרצה בהם ורצה להידבק בהם ולהתקשר עמהם. So again, so this reaches or joins what we spoke about, the shivui tzura, the affinity of form, in the likeness of the purity of our soul, as we are, the more we are like the light, and the more the light wants to connect with us, will give us opportunities. And so this is what the Zohar here says, but like sort of like in a different angle, which says, Kama ahuvim הם bnei Israel, so how loved are the descendants of Jacob, שרצה בהם ורצה לדבק בהם, that the Creator wants to cleave in them, ולהתקשר עמהם, and connect with them. So imagine, it's not that you need to do any effort to connect to the Creator. As you are doing the spiritual work and you are on the spiritual path, meaning that you are actively spiritual, then you're drawing the light force of the Creator that wants to cleave with you. Make sense? Yes? Like there is like it's another lesson that was discussed, like when you are around somebody who is like really spiritual and really doing the spiritual work. I remember like at the time pre-stroke of the Rav would come into the room and everybody would want to be close to the Rav. Everybody would want to get a blessing. Everybody would want to touch the Rav, to shake the hand of the Rav, to get a kiss from the Rav. And I mean, I didn't know who the Rav was when I met him, and it was electrifying, literally electrifying. The first time that my father introduced me, I didn't know who the Rav and Karen are. My father sent me a plane ticket from Marseille to come for Shabbat. I couldn't remember like the Shabbat prior to that I participated in. We're not very we're not practicing Jews, and for me to be part of something like that was very unusual. But my dad asked me to do that, to get on a plane ticket and to fly from Marseille to Paris. It was the first time that I flew by myself. I think I was 16 or something like that. And I fly, and there was like a Shabbat, there was a wedding of two teachers, two chevre, and so at some point, my father introduces me to the Rav and Karen. So that was back in 1990, and that was the first time that I'm meeting with the Rav and Karen. And so, I kissed the hand of the Rav. I just copied whatever everybody else was doing, and I could, and how to put this into words. As I'm kissing the hand of the Rav, I see an electroshock. Like there was such a huge transmission of energy, and I didn't know who the Rav was, and I wasn't like such a found person of religion and rabbis, and I really wasn't attracted to those things, and so for me, meeting with the Rav really, was like a light bulb moment, and it was very special, and I just wanted to repeat that experience. So making a long story short, my father trapped me. He put me on the spot, and he tells the Rav and Karen, my son, me, wants to become chevre. So again, I'm 16. I know nothing of the center. I know nothing of what is to be a chevre and what is to be like full-time volunteer. And Karen looks at me and says, really? I look at my dad. I don't even know what he's talking about. And I say, sure, yes. I ended up, going there for Shabbat. And I stayed there as a chevre in training or whatever you call it. I didn't last more than a week, so don't get excited. As I saw that, like those guys were waking up at 5 o'clock, praying, going, knocking doors, and I did this for almost a week with Eliyahu Yordeni, who is still a chevre and teacher today, and I can vividly remember what a piece of work I was to him, because every step of the way I was like, when are we going back? And I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I'm tired. I was a 16-year-old. What did I understand in spiritual work, in life mission, soul's calling, or whatnot? It didn't last more than a week. Long story short, or fast forward, when I moved to Miami, that's when I moved for myself. I saw and I met the Kabbalah Center. I saw Shimon again, who I met back in 1990 there in Miami, and then I stayed and I became Chevre like a couple of years later. But all this to say that when you meet somebody who is like truly spiritual and connected, you don't need to have somebody tell you this person is spiritual. I think last week I also mentioned that when the Rav was traveling as a civilian, like random people would go to him and ask him for a blessing. And that is not like, it didn't happen to me this far, that I go on the airport and somebody comes to me and says, Yehuda, can you give me a blessing? Not yet. But it tells you so much about, what this person and how special this person is and what this person emanates. And so, again, when we are talking about like random people that want to go and connect to this individual, they're drawn to the light. So imagine that when we are active with our spiritual work, this is what we emanate, and we draw people to come to us, ask for advice, ask for help, ask for all sorts of things, to help them out in some ways. And so that connection that is created when we do the spiritual work, some people say, well, I'm praying and I'm doing this, and where's the creator? We need to know that the creator is always at every single moment with us simultaneously, but is more becoming apparent and present as we are becoming more like the light. We're speaking about this concept of shivui tzura, the similarity of form, but it's more reinforced here in this verse from the Zohar, where the Zohar actually, gives it another spin. It's not that, you elevate your consciousness and then you elevate to the creator. No, in addition to that, what the Zohar is saying is, as you are doing the spiritual work and you activate that capsule of spirituality inside of you, removing those layers of negativities, being negative, complaining, everything that we listed, it's not you that the light comes to. The light is drawn to you, and the light wants to give you more. To give you another example, imagine, like when you have like a relationship with a friend that you've been trying to share spirituality, wisdom, or Kabbalah, and that person wasn't like so excited or so open. And then one day, this person is starting to ask you questions. And so as this person is starting to ask you questions, you really think, oh my God, Mashiach, Messiah is here. What a miracle. And so you're super excited, and you need to remember, you need to restrict, because if you were not to restrict, you would dump all this knowledge that you've accumulated for the last 8 years, and this person would be like fried, after what just happened? Why did I ask her anything? And so, but this is the excitement when somebody comes to you, the vessel comes to you, and he's like opening the channel. All you want to do is share endlessly with that vessel. And this is what the light does with us. As soon as we open like a little, a little opening, the light just wants to give us everything that's available in the universe. That's what this verse is about. And so, שרצה בהם ורצה להידבק בהם ולהתקשר עמהם, ועשה אותם עם יחיד בעולם, and made those people one people, unique people. שכתוב, ומי כעמך כישראל, גוי אחד בארץ, והוא רצו בו ונתקשרו בו. זה שכתוב, כי יעקב בחר לו יה. So it started with Jacob, who chose for himself Yud K, from the Yud K Vav K. So the Yud K Vav K again is Chochma and Bina, and then Vav K is Zir and Pin, and then Malchut. So Jacob chose the Yud K, so the highest level of following, or the spiritual path. וכתוב כי חלק ה' עמו, ונתן לשאר העמים שרים מושלים עליהם, והוא לקח לחלקו את ישראל. It's very powerful. רבי שמעון פתח, מי זאת הנשקפה כמו שחר יפה וגומר? Okay, it goes into the sfirot, so I won't go into that. Okay, I'll just touch upon this, which is the 5th verse of this portion. And so he talks about Leah and Rachel. So Leah and Rachel are the two sisters that Jacob married. And although we are talking about the historical aspect of the event, the Zohar goes into a different aspect, which is the level of light that each one represents. So when we're speaking about Rachel, it represents a certain aspect of light, and when he talks about Leah, he talks about a different aspect of light that is being revealed. So again, when he talks about Jacob, he also talks about Tiferet, the same as when we're talking about Joseph, he talks about Yesod. מה הפירוש? אם הכתוב מדבר בשנית עולמו, so we're talking about the two different realms, Leah and Rachel, שהם בחינת בינה, so one is בינה and one is מלכות. So Rachel is מלכות and Leah is בינה, שנכללו יחד, that are included as one. איזה קינה יש כאן? So we're not, like there was like the word kina'ah, which means jealousy, but for when you're elevating to such levels, we're not talking about like the physical jealousy that we know. ומשיב כך הוא ודאי, כי עולם התחתון רחל. And so the guidance that we're getting here is that the lower realm that is called Rachel, we spoke about מלכות, כל חשקה אינה יותר אלא להיות כעין עולם העליון. discussing also Leah being בינה ולרשת מקומה, במקום אחד, יש קינת סופרים תרבה חוכמה. And so this is a very, I would say, sophisticated interpretation of the word jealousy. We probably mentioned it like in the countless of classes that you've taken about jealousy, that the highest form of jealousy, not the highest, most negative form of jealousy, but the highest form of jealousy, which is the most elevated, and therefore where there is no negativity whatsoever, is where jealousy stems from. So when jealousy is manifested in the level of Malchut, it is an energy that is spoiled. But when that energy is not spoiled and it is in its utmost shape of energy, it is called Kinat Sofrim. Kinat Sofrim translates into the jealousy of the scribes. And the jealousy of the scribes, imagine like what when we're talking about the Sofer or Sofer Stam, is a scribe that writes mezuzot. So it's interesting that we read about this because I've been tasked to take care of the Sofrim in the center. So we've been working with scribes for as long as we can remember, for the last 40 years, because we're selling mezuzot, but we need to make sure that the mezuzah that we put at the door is kosher. Now, there are different ways to define kosher, and as long as it's written on a parchment, which is like a cow skin or whatnot, and is written with a specific ink, that there are special meditations, special font, etc. You can call this parchment, this mezuzah, kosher. The Rav always spoke about the fact that it's very hard to find a kosher mezuzah. And it's not until I was in Israel, but even before I was in Israel, my sister once brought me, when I was in Boca, she bought from a synagogue, a temple, a mezuzah, and she asked me to put it on her door, front door. And I said, do you mind if I open it? I didn't know why. I'm not like a fine connoisseur of mezuzah, but something made me want to check the inside. So she granted my request. I opened it, I unrolled it. It was rolled in like, thin plastic or whatnot. And as I unroll the parchment, I realized that it's not a parchment, it's a Xerox copy. So, and it seems that it's not a mistake. It's not like somebody like cheated her or whatnot. It just seems like the current thing that is being done, especially if you go to a conservative or reform synagogue, they don't put as much emphasis into those things, what makes a mezuzah kosher. So you could just print it on a regular paper, you roll it and, you stick it to the door. It's like a prayer. So it's not like, for some of them, it's not a big deal. Now, we have a scribe that is working full time here in Los Angeles, but the demand in the last few months, in the last year, has increased so much that we can keep up. And so I'm looking for at least one or two additional sofrim. In the United States, there is nowhere to be found. So one place that you would go to is to Israel. But 99.9% of the scribes, they don't do it the way that the Kabbalah Center requires to do it. What's so special about the way of doing it in the center? So the center didn't invent it. The center is going by the way of the Ari, the Rav Isaac Luria. It's the font of the Ari. It's the, like the antennas that go on top of the letters. It's the type of parchment. It's the size of the parchment. It is the ink that is usually used by most. A big difference is the mikveh before each Yud Kei Vav Kei. So I've spoken to countless of scribes and people that work with over 50 scribes each. I spoke to two of them. And they say, we used to work with you guys, the Kabbalah Center, for over 5 years. And it was great. But at some point, and it's one of the reasons why we quit working with you, it's because your requirement, which is not our requirement, it's just the way of the Ari, which is to do the mikveh before each Yud Kei Vav Kei, is too much for them. It's too time-consuming, and time-consuming in writing mezuzot is money. So it is not something that's viable, that's good for them, sustainable for them. So they chose, all of them chose to stop doing it. So what they do is that they do mikveh, like the first time that they're about to go and start writing, and that's it. So they do one-time mikveh for the entire day. And so, and I asked, so what about like each one of the Yud Kei Vav Kei? No, they don't do, like it's only that way. And there are very few people in Israel that do that. The thing is that if they get booked to write Torah scroll, for example, they're on contract for 2 years. And then, there aren't many that are left. So anyway, making a long story short, when we're talking about the sofrim, kinat sofrim, this is where it's coming from. It is two scribes usually sitting in a room. It needs to be not pitch dark. It needs to be complete quiet. And they cannot talk also, by the way. which is another requirement that was too much for the scribes. So a lot of the scribes in Israel, they listen to the radio, or they have like the TV on, or they can talk, and they're not as strict as what the Ari basically requires. And so we found somebody who is who can do this, and we are like in the process of, you know, verifying and checking and putting them under contract, because we want to make sure that what we deliver is really what is being promised. And so it's still not like totally close, but it is getting closer. So again, they would sit in a room, and then you would have you know, several scribes writing next to each other. And then sometimes, you know, like you have like in a classroom, you have like those students, like kids, you know, like look upon the shoulder of the other, and they try to copy, right? And so the kinat sofrin, the jealousy of the scribe, is that an elevated consciousness of a scribe that has the most pure consciousness. This is why they need to repeat doing mikveh all the time, because they need not to wash their body, but to wash their mind from anything that could come and disturb or distract them. And so they could look over the shoulder and be inspired or impressed by the skills, the writing of that specific scribe. And so the jealousy that we know is that we, like, it's a negative jealousy, like, you know, like a jealousy that opens the gate for evil eye or something like that. But the scribe that has an elevated consciousness would look upon the shoulder of his neighbor doing also the same thing, and it would motivate him to work harder so he can become at least as good. So what we know of jealousy on the level of Malchut is that we see somebody, something that somebody has, or married to somebody that is much younger, or somebody that has children and that person doesn't have, and they envy, they want it, but from a place of lack. And so it's not like they're working, they're gonna commit and work like 1,000% to reach that place, because this person didn't reach this success out of nothing. They worked hard. And so that's kinat sofrin. So kinat sofrin is that you have Leah and Rachel that represent that unity. And we want to bring that kinat sofrin from the level of Binah to the level of Malchut, where the jealousy infused with the envy and with the evil eye, and cleanse that away from us. This is why Rachel, who represents also Malchut, has gained the power, perfected the skill of protection against evil eye. And so this is why she's known as the protector, right? Protector of the children of Israel. So she would like spread her wings. And so obviously we're not talking about physical wings, and we're not talking just about her hands, because just the fact that she would raise her hands would raise this protective shield amongst 3 million people. That was the power of Rachel, that she has unified that energy from Binah to the energy of Malchut, of the Kinat Sofrin, to remove jealousy from anybody that would wish harm. So although we're talking, there's so many lessons that are being discussed in this portion, and again, we just discussed like 1.5 verses. If there is one thing that we can gain, is to elevate our jealousy to the level of the scribe, the jealousy of the scribe, and to remove evil eye from anywhere where it could come, either where we are the recipient or where we are becoming more conscious that I'm looking upon the shoulder of a neighbor and I wish I could have that, but operating from a place of lack. So I want to remove that, because as I remove that, I'm drawing more light to come to me. The light is being drawn to me as I'm restricting those negative traits. Any questions? We're good? Oh gosh, such good students. All right. Well, let me wish all of you an amazing week, and we'll meet again on Monday.
Such a good teacher.
Oh, thank you. Let me
Thank you.
brush off the
Thank
ego
you,
here.
Yehuda.
Oh,
That's
hold
what
on.
I thought. So clear.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Love you.
Love
Talk
you
to
too.
See you soon.
A bientôt.
Bye.